Hi guys and gals, it's Shane Stevenson here at the Buffalo Naval Park, and for today's video, the last video of 2024, I'm going to be covering the mystery of Larapin Lulu. This comes from the Jack Lee collection that if you watch that video from about a week and a half ago, received a package of his effects from a family member in California. And I was starting to go through, and this interesting story emerged. Unfortunately, as these things go, and this goes all the way back 3,000, 4,000 years to cuneiform, when you have a collection, you receive, in the collection, you'll receive what the person received, but you rarely ever receive the correspondence or the response or the answer, because that is in the other person's possession. So this is why it's a mystery, and but it still is a pretty interesting story. So we'll let you come up with your beliefs on this. Okay, so it starts off. I'm going to be covering a steel plant, all right, and I'll be giving the backstory of everything. So I've got the PowerPoint here. Let's check that out. Nope. There we go. Okay, so the mystery of Larapin Lulu. So this is the Yawata Iron and Steel Works, a state-sponsored steel plant and iron plant that was established in about 1901. With the outbreak of one of the Japanese and Chinese wars, plans were put into place to construct a state-run iron and steel works, and that was this Yawata steel plant. It also is Yahata as well, so it could be Yawata or Yahata, one with a W, one with an H. So this was kind of Japan's first foray into steel making on a state-run level, and they brought in engineers and steel workers from Germany to help them design this plant. They did have three other state-run sites in Hiroshima, Kamiyashi, and Nakaosaka. But this also coincides with the growth of their steel-hulled ships. So the plant again was constructed, began construction in 1895, opened in 1901, and Yawata was chosen because of other coal mines that were around this region. And so at the time, things were fired by coal, so it made perfect sense. The plan for this plant was to produce originally about 180,000 tons of steel per year. So we have this large steel plant, and now the story kind of comes together. Now you fast forward to World War II, and you have Operation Matterhorn put into place, where American B-29 bombers are going to be stationed in China, in Chengdu, to go east to bomb the China mainlands. You'll see that this was the 20th Air Force 58th Bomber Wing, which was made up of these bomber groups that you see here: 40th, 444th, 462nd, and 468th. They're all based out of, oh, I'm sorry, that got messed up. They're all based out of airfields in Kansas. The campaign started in June of 1944, and Yawata was one of the sites that was perpetually targeted. So how does Jack Lee's collection fit into this? Again, bombing runs started in June of 44. We're now looking at August of 44. Croaker is stationed in the East China Sea and is told to do some lifeguard duty. So, from August 18th to August 21st, they are told to report to this area in the East China Sea and stay in communication with bombers and their radio men. So, this one particular plane, bomber, comes from Chengdu. The little red blood dot there is Yawata. They bomb the steel plant, and now they're going back. Unfortunately, they take flak, and the bomber is shot down. There is a survivor who I'll talk about in a minute, and that's kind of how the story comes together. So they are shot down, and as you see the little last red arrow there, it goes to Iki Island. And he parachutes out. This gentleman I'll talk about is captured, becomes a POW, and then his story continues now through the 80s and 90s, where someone wants to write a book about him. And the correspondence in the collection begins with this individual writing to now Rear Admiral Jack Lee, retired. The two little yellow arrows that you see are the Croaker and the Pintado, who went out together and were stationed roughly in the same area during this time of August 18th through August 21st. So the individual we're talking about is a Major Harold J. Mann. He was a wing bombardier who had flown 30 missions prior to this particular mission. His B-29 is shot down. He parachutes out, lands on Iki Island, and becomes a POW. He's eventually rescued at the end of the war and is awarded 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses and 3 Purple Hearts. So in being interviewed, Major Mann states that before they were shot down, the radio man on the B-29 was in contact with 2 submarines in the area. Those submarines were codenamed by his radio men, Cleaver Clary and Larapin Lulu. So through the course of the interviews and subsequent research, it's believed that Clara Cleaver was the code name for the Pintado, as the CEO of their time was Bernard Clary. So Cleaver Clary. The person who's interviewing Major Mann states he believes, based on our records and the records we have here for the war diaries, the War Patrol records, and, looking at other resources, that the Croaker was Larapin Lulu. So why they just didn't, if the CEO of the Pintado at the time is Clary, and they use Cleaver Clary, Larapin Lulu, why didn't they just use Larapin Lee? Because CO Jack Lee was the commanding officer at this time on her first war patrol. So that is a mystery. Maybe it's kind of lost to time. Maybe Major Mann misremembered and said Lulu when he really meant Lee, Larapin Lee. We just don't know, and that's why there's a mystery here. So we do have evidence that, the Croaker was there at the time. They have a few contacts with some Mavis planes, Japanese planes. All right, and if we go into the records, they said they are proceeded towards station for lifeguard duty. All right, that is the 17th of August. 18th and 19th patrolled in vicinity of assigned lifeguard duty. On the 19th, they received word that a B-29 raid would be delayed, probably pushed back because of weather, potentially until the 20th. So they sighted a Mavis-type plane. So they're surfacing and submerging because they see there's a lot of plane activity, and one plane actually is, flies directly overhead. All right, but they address in the records that they are listening to aircraft frequencies to see if there's a connection, and that they have none. So by 1900 or 7 p.m. on the 21st of August, they say they surfaced, they received word that lifeguard duties were complete, and they commenced departure of the area. And very shortly after that, a couple of days later, they're now en route to Midway to end their first patrol. And then their second war patrol leaves from Midway Island. So they are in the right area based on maps and laying it out. I showed that Google map. The one in the more towards the 5 o'clock. I'll do this again. I'm sorry, more towards, say, 1 o'clock in the upper right of the upper of the two yellow arrows was the Croaker. The Pintado was right after that. And they predict that, or Harold Mann says that they were about 30 minutes away, 25 to 30 minutes away flying. But their engines were on fire and they had to bail at Iki Island there. So the Croaker does not report in their war patrols that there was any contact. The Pintado does have contact. And of course, then the radioman, he remembers the radioman on the bomber itself in contact with two submarines. So I'm sure there wasn't a CO in this vicinity with the name of Lulu. So it could potentially be the code name for a Croaker. But as the evidence is lacking, we just don't know. Can we surmise? Maybe so. But I just found that a very interesting correspondence as I was going through the Jack Lee records, that all of a sudden there's this chatter. There's a gentleman who talks to Harold Mann, wants to write a book, reaches out to Rear Admiral Lee. But then again, we don't have Lee's responses. So if you ever have a collection and you're building a collection for an archive, make sure you photocopy or keep a copy, photocopy a letter, or if you're writing email, make sure you always keep those emails. So archivists like myself could have the initial correspondence and the response to that as well. So I hope you enjoyed this little look. They're going to Iwata to bomb a steel factory that was producing about 24% of all steel in Japan at the time. And thankfully, Major Mann survived the POW camps and lived to tell his story. So what do you think about Larapin Lulu being Croaker? Cleaver Clary is pretty clear. Pintado, they were together, as you see. Anyway, I hope you enjoy, and again, I hope you have a very good New Year's Eve and day, and we'll be seeing you again in 2025. Thanks so much, everyone.